Hello, everybody. I'm so excited today to be talking about your goals for the next 5 years. And I understand that January has almost ended, and a lot of goal taking or goal setting activities are done in the last quarter of the previous year. But I find that this is a perfect time for you to sit and analyze and see whether how far you are from the goals that you set up for yourself for 2026. And if the answer is making worried or stressed or maybe a little hesitant to look into the numbers and the data, then I think it is time to recalibrate and look at the bigger picture. Because whether you run a single practice or you run multi-location dental groups, it is important to understand what your end goal is and then work your way back from that end goal and divide your progress into chunks. So although you have goals set for the year, but it may be an important step to look at what you think your next 5 years should look like or next 10 years should look like. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about in this video. And before I dive deeper into the topic, what I think is important is that unless you know what your goals are like or what they look like, it is very difficult to track your progress and understand where the leaks are. Because whether you run multiple locations or whether you operate from a single location, your progress can be compared to people who've probably scaled or groups or businesses who've already scaled past that level, but you are on your own path. And your systems, your teams, your protocols, your processes, your brand is exclusive to what you've built over the years. And therefore, the next step is going to be exactly exclusive to where you stand right now, but it's not going to be something that you can replicate from other businesses. Yes, you can take an inspiration, but you cannot say that you're going to just exactly duplicate somebody else's model because you think that that works best. And that is exactly what I'm going to be talking to you here in this video about. It's about setting the right goals and then identifying what KPIs to measure, and then understanding how those KPIs help you progress towards your goals eventually. Because if you're not monitoring your progress, if you're not analyzing where the lags are, then it's going to be very difficult for you to improve and fix your performance issues and take your practice or your group to the next level. So let's get into it. This video is going to be primarily focused on multi-location dental groups. But if you run a single location practice, then you can also take a lot of insights from this video and let me know if there's anything in particular that you want me to focus on in the future, and I'll do that. So there are two types of practices. There's a single practice where the model primarily depends on the owner. So it's a very, the production is tied to your personal production. The goodwill is tied to the owner doctor and the immediate team, because it's a single location, and it's very easy for you to directly interact with the patients and directly, communicate with them and directly have that kind of a relationship where you are the primary, where you're the soul of the practice. But then that means that there's limited scalability, because even if you think about moving to a second location, let alone third, fourth, or fifth, then that goodwill is very difficult to replicate because you're just one person. You can't be in two places at one time. So even if you're running a single practice, and I'm not going to get into a lot of details about single practices, but there's just one thing that I have noticed over the years of studying DSOs and dental group scale. Even if you're running a single practice, have systems in place that eventually are impacting the patient experience and building your brand and goodwill, because you do not want to be in a place where in the next 15, 20, 25 years you're looking for an exit, and you are looking at complete buyouts. Because if that is something that is going to directly impact your financial stance, because if you are personally tied to the practice, the valuation drops significantly when it comes to you're looking at your EBITDA variance and your EBITDA predictability, because your EBITDA is then not independent of you. It's very dependent on the systems in place. It's very dependent on the protocols in place. So one advice for anyone who's running a single practice and is not, although is not willing to scale to a multi-location practice, but is eventually looking at growth, is to start by understanding where you want to be and then start putting systems in place. And I've done another video on what systems to audit first and how to fix them. But it's very important to understand that you map out an entire roadmap and understand exactly what systems you have in place, where the leakages are, and which should be prioritized to be fixed before you think about fixing any other systems or any other processes or bring in any new tools or people in place. So that is one thing to take away for single practices. However, if you are looking at an enterprise level scale, say you already have 5 or 10 location practices and you're looking to grow into like a very big, huge group, such as like go to 20, 25, 30, 35, even 50 or more locations, then it is going to be a completely different game for you. And systems become a non-negotiable aspect of your dental group growth. And you need to have locations that are systematized. And we will talk about how you can go about it and what are the exact protocols and where to start first. But it's important that your teams are driven by values. They're being their progress is being monitored by certain benchmarks, certain KPIs, and then that kind of independence, independent infrastructure, independent systems, independent protocols translates into transferable EBITDA, which means that your EBITDA is then replicated location after location, and it is not dependent on you as an owner or on the immediate team, on the practice manager, on the assistants that you have, on the hygienists that you have in place, because everything, the burden of the entire system is being taken over by the burden of the entire practice, the burden of the entire goodwill, the burden of the entire revenue and production is being handled by the systems that your practice is running on. So in order to understand how that works, you need to also understand that when you're operating at a dental group level, because there are 3 different layers where your operations are being handled. One is that each location, which is called like location based, or that is like very nuclear operations, right? And then the other one is cluster or regional. Now that depends on how big you are. If you're just operating from a single state, but you're in like 5 different locations, then that is a different story. But if you have multiple locations, say 40, 50 locations, and you're running a multi-state dental group, then that is a completely different ballgame, because you then need to have not just location-based operations, but you also need to have regional monitoring of your operations. And then you need a corporate governance structure, because in order for the EBITDA to be scaled and replicated, it is important that your systems are not just running seamlessly at each location. They're the exact systems which speak the same language, which resonate the same brand experience that you created, but those systems then compound to the same experience at the regional level as well. And then all the regions combine to give you the same experience nationwide. And that means that is exactly what defines you as a brand. So how you can visualize it is through this. So I'm just going to zoom out to give you a bigger picture of what it looks like. As a multi-location dental group with several offices across, say, multiple states or multiple locations, there's only a certain capacity of where the human governance can work, right? Because you can only expect an individual to work to a certain capacity after and give their optimal performance, because there are a lot of factors, and that is a story for another day. But ideally, if you're working from like you're operating a multi-location, multi-state dental group, then you need location-based governance, and then you need regional governance, and then you need corporate governance. And although this is a model that can be adapted and can be flexible depending on how, again, it all comes down to how your people are performing and how you're monitoring and where the gaps are, and if you think that certain people in certain locations can be pushed a little more. But this is just to give you a benchmark. So each location must resonate the same kind of clinical experience, must have the same office operations, and must give the same patient experience to the patients. So if patients are calling in, they should know that what the next steps are. Your office, your staff should know how to handle each call. If it's a hygiene call, what is the next step? If it's a high value case, then how do you talk to them? How do you talk about the finances? How do you understand what the patient needs, immediate needs are? How do you understand how to block their schedule and book them in, and how to get those appointments moving? You need to understand that each location must have a protocol in place to make sure that you are not just handling the immediate inquiries, but you're ready to take on anyone who is coming in with a high value case, or coming in with a need that cannot be served elsewhere. Because for patients to be attracted to your practice and to be retained, your practice needs to have systems in place that make it an easy choice for anyone who is looking to get the best oral care, whether it's for a low value case, a hygiene case, or whether it's for a high value case. And it is very important that your dentists follow the same protocols. Your dentists know how they have to be, how much time is required, and how their times are scheduled, how your team knows how the schedules have to be blocked, and what the yield is going to look like. And your front staff knows, even the smallest of things matter, because the way that your front staff, the way your team is greeting the patients, the kind of customer experience they're giving, how quickly the phones are being handled. All of these things eventually lead to in not just increasing production and revenue, but also creating an experience that lasts a lifetime and eventually is not just replicated or not just scaled through paid forms of advertising and marketing and media, but can also be scaled through, just the word of mouth, just getting in better referrals because the patients enjoyed the experience that you created for them. And at this level, it is, although it is not very difficult, but I'm going to eventually be talking about also the KPIs that you have to, just monitor at each level. In fact, let's just get into it right now. So when you talk about location level or frontline performance KPIs, it is very important to understand what is your production per provider per hour. I think there's nothing more important to track at any stage, whether it's a single practice or a multi-location dental group, than your production per provider per hour or per operatory per hour, because productivity without incentivizing rushed care, productivity that is thought out, productivity that is logical, and productivity that has been engineered is the first and foremost step towards creating an experience that you can be proud of. Next is the office operations, and that was for the clinical care. For office operations, it is very important that your staff, your office managers, they understand that no-shows or short notice cancellation rates give you a direct hit on your revenue, because it's all the time, all the money, and all the effort and energy that you put into bringing somebody in. And when they no-show or they cancel, it means that lost chair time is a direct hit on the cost that you spent on bringing somebody in. So you need to make sure that your front desk, it speaks, and what it confirms is your front desk execution and patient commitment. And you need to make sure that your front desk understands that they need to have the verbiage, the systems, the follow-up cadence in place that make sure that the no-show rates and cancellations can be reduced as much as possible. And although it's at a decision-making level, it is not the front desk or your office manager's place to exactly take decisions on what solutions to implement. That we're going to talk about at the corporate governance level. But at this level, your no-shows and cancellations should be monitored, because that is a metric that helps you understand where the gaps are and whether this is the layer that needs to be improved. Because if you have 100 patients and say 60 are not showing or 60 are canceling, then that volume can be, if that volume or that leakage or that gap can be fixed, then that is an immediate increase in your revenue or EBITDA. Next, KPI to watch at the location level or the frontline performance level is your patient experience. That is a treatment completion rate. It is one thing to bring patients in the door. It is another to get them to accept the treatment. And what really matters is whether that treatment is being delivered and what your collections look like. So if your treatments are not being completed, that means that you're not collecting the revenue on the time, energy that you spent on bringing the patient in, giving them a treatment plan, having that treatment plan accepted, and then completing that treatment plan. Because end of the day, your revenue and your collections depend on how many treatments are you completing that you referred your patient to. If your patients follow through on the recommended care, then that means that effect multiplies, because if they're satisfied with your practice, number one is the immediate financial benefit, obviously, because you can collect only what you performed, and then the other one is also goodwill, because end of the day, if your treatment has helped them with their immediate pain, with their confidence, with their with their immediate needs that they came to you for, then that patient experience is going to lead to revenue and good reviews, good word of mouth. Because in this and not just today, because today the entire impact of word of mouth has multiplied significantly thanks to social mediums, because there are so many communities where if you just go in and listen, the patients are sharing their experiences. And especially when it comes to high value care, then those experiences, those reviews matter a lot, because if you're doing implants, if you're doing a lot of restorative work, if you're doing a very high value case, then the patients are willing to even travel if they know that they have the trust in you, if they know that they can come to you and get the kind of treatment that they're expecting. So that goodwill, those reviews, and that experience speaks volumes about how you're going to be perceived by the patients at large for a particular service. So once you have the same experience replicated at every location, and the clinical care, the office operations, and the patient experience, these are non-negotiables. They have to be perfected at every location. And once you have those KPIs in place that we just talked about, you can then compare your notes for each location and see that which locations are lagging, which locations are leading. And once you have that comparative analysis on the lagging and leading positions, then you can pick out the top performers and see how they're doing things differently. Once you have the top performers, once you have the procedures and the processes that they're following, it becomes very, very easy to replicate them across locations, right? Because without any governance, without any monitoring, without any performance protocols in place, it becomes difficult for a location to standardize operations, for any dental group to standardize operations across different locations. So why I place a lot of emphasis on governance and control and monitoring and data and KPIs, the sole reason for that is that unless you know exactly what to track, you will not be able to see where the leaks are, and you will not be able to replicate top performance across at scale. Now, I believe that, this is just something that I believe is doable. If you want to stretch your teams beyond this, you should have the KPIs and again, the monitoring in place to understand how far they can be stretched before the performance starts to take a dip. And the next level is the regional management or the regional care. And so when you once you have multiple locations, more than, even if you have just two locations, it's important to have certain systems that are monitored on a regional level. So if you have like 2 or 3 locations, then this layer becomes your corporate governance level. It does not translate into like a regional level. But if you have more than 8 or more than 16 locations, then you need to have at least 2 regional corporate governance officers in place. So I believe that for at least 5 to 8 locations, you don't need another layer. You can easily be, your regional and your corporate governance can easily be monitored and managed by the same team. But again, it will only depend on how far your teams can be stretched, and the data should be the deciding factor for that. Now, when I talk about the regional level, operations management and your clinical oversight and your people and performance management. Now, these 3 functions have to be governed at the regional level. How your operations are being handled. So we'll talk about the KPIs as well, and how and what your clinical oversight is like, how your people are performing. For every 8 locations, the protocols and the benchmarks have to be set at the regional level. And how you set the regional protocols and benchmarks, again, is through KPIs. These are only the top KPIs. There's far more detail and depth that goes into it. Oh, and this is not the corporate level. This is the regional level controls. So when we talk about operational management at the regional level, it is what the schedule utilization rates across locations are. That is, the chairs and provider hours, are they converting into production, or are they just converting into or are they just being utilized by consultations that are not converting into production? Because when we talked about office operations, when we talk about no-shows and cancellation rates, then that is one metric that is very important, because when you have no-shows and cancellations happening at one location, you have revenue leakages that have to be monitored and handled, and that can significantly impact your eventual revenue. But when you have that same impact replicated across locations, then the leakages also magnify, and that is something that you have to take into consideration, because when the leakages magnify and they go unnoticed, then that leakage eventually gets noticed in your EBITDA and revenue and your profit and loss statement, and that hit you get on your valuation. And if you're not able to monitor and track and rectify those leakages at the location level, then you're going to eventually be impacted at a scale that will be very hard to control eventually. And that is why it is important that you understand what your schedule utilization rates are across locations. And again, I have another video where I talk about how you move from your capacity utilization to your scheduling protocols to your patient acquisition systems, and then how you have your clinical systems in place, and how that impacts your financial revenue. And for all of this to work in coherence, it is important that you have systems that are tied together and that are performing well, like a well-oiled engine. And for example, in your provider, at every location, do you have your schedules blocked for high value cases? Are you getting a lot of no-shows or cancellations? Do you have like chair time that is being, just given to a lot of consultations and is not converting into accepted treatment plans? If all of that is true, then that leakage has to be monitored and that leakage has to be adjusted. Next is the clinical oversight. So high value case acceptance rate is the primary KPI that you have to monitor. Again, like I said, if you have now your high value case acceptance rate impacts your production per operatory per day, because if your production per operatory per day for one location is 800 and for another location is 2500, something there is off. You have to see what your utilization is like. You have to see what kind of cases are you getting. You have to see whether high value cases are not being canceled because you don't have any schedule blocked for them. And clinical diagnosis and presentation standards have to be aligned, because if your diagnosis and standards are not aligned, then the care will not be standardized. And if the care is not standardized across locations, then it's going to eventually impact your patient experience. And once you have, again, a comparative analysis of all locations, once you have the KPIs in place, you can know exactly which locations, which operatories are performing well, and then you can have the same functions, the same systems, the same protocols replicated across each location, each operatory, for each provider. And that benchmarking also helps you have an SOP and a protocol in place that lets your clinicians perform to their maximum level. So if one of the operatory or one of the chair or one of the clinician is struggling, then through the protocols, through the metrics, you can exactly identify where the leakages are. If the schedule is not being blocked, then that's on this. Then your office management team needs to look into that. If the schedule is being blocked, but the treatment presentation is not working, then you have to talk to your clinician about that. If the treatment was presented, but it is not getting accepted, then what are the factors? Do you have the right kind of financing in place? Did you communicate urgency? Was there confidence in the presentation style? Was there, did you build that kind of a rapport and a relationship with the patient where you're trying to understand their need before presenting or selling them the treatment? So all of those things matter. Now, before getting into further details, without getting into further details, and if you're looking to get more depth into it, then I can obviously let me know and I'll do another video on it. But the next important KPI, and for the one of the three functions that have to be monitored at the regional level, is people and performance. The 90-day rolling staff turnover rate. If your staff is leaving very rapidly, that is going to take a hit on you, because there's a cost to attracting, and then there's a cost to training the team, and then there's a cost to retention. And that cost is going to really impact your EBITDA if you are not, the cost to attract, train, and retain people is much higher than the cost to attract and train people is much higher than the cost to retain. And all you have to do is make sure that your people are happy, your people want to stay, your people want to have a feel that they're being utilized to their optimum level. Your people feel that they have a career that they look forward to having with your group or with your practice. And the workforce stability before the production. A workforce stability makes your production stabilize and even scale. So if you have a good team that you've trained over the years, they're loyal to you. They're also going to create a lot of goodwill for you. And that goodwill, again, like resonates location after location, region after region, and really takes off at a national scale. So performance and people has to be governed at the regional level. If you have one location with people who are performing consistently, they're on time, they're staying, and they're performing like they're scheduling people on time, they're greeting them in the right manner, they have this right schedule link protocols in place, they're getting better case acceptances, then and this holds true for clinicians, for office managers, and for your front desk staff, for your hygienists, for your dental assistants. And if all of that is working well on one location, then that can be used as a benchmark and replicated across other locations. Once you have one region stabilized, then you can have the same protocols, and you don't have to even wait for one region to stabilize. If you can just have one location that is outperforming every other location, then use that as a benchmark and start replicating their protocols across every other location, whether it is in the same region or whether it is in a different region. Obviously, there are certain aspects that have to be monitored on a regional level as well. But then to start with the basics, it's important that you take that location level performance and you start replicating that instead of looking at regional benchmarks. So it is very important to take the small step, the first step, the baby steps first before you look at the larger steps. So pick one KPI, pick one location, and start improving, using it as a benchmark to improve other locations, to improve, and the same goes for the regions. Pick one KPI, pick one region and then do a comparative analysis. See which region is outperforming the other ones, see which one is lagging, and see where the gaps are and how you can improve them. So once you grow to a scale where you feel that you need like multiple regional managers, like I said, you can go for like one regional manager for every 8 locations. But if your teams, if you can stretch your teams, or if you can stretch your teams beyond that, feel free to do it. But that is sometimes stretching beyond a certain limit can also impact the team performance and lead to burnout. Ideally, you should stay somewhere between 5 to 8 locations. But if you had a different experience than that, then let me know in the comments below. So once you know exactly what is the level at which your regional managers give their best, then you can easily create clusters and start duplicating that structure throughout your group. So this gives you a fair idea of how you can standardize performance. And so if your regional managers in the first cluster are giving their best for 8 locations, and your regional managers in the second cluster are lagging after 5 locations, then you need to see what level is the one that has to be addressed, which of the roles have to be trained, what the issues are. Sometimes when it comes to training people and having them perform, the issue is really not technical. It can be intrinsic or extrinsic. So as a group leader, you need to understand that building the relationship with your teams is going to eventually translate into the relationship that they have with your patients. And eventually, the patient experience matters the most, whether it's a single practice or a multi-practice, because let's face it, dentistry is a people-focused business, is a people-faced business. So if you have the kind of experience for patients or for the people that is leading to a great performance, that is leading to them talking about you in in high notes with their friends, with their colleagues, in social circles, in online communities, then obviously it's only going to do good to your group at large. On the regional level, again, the KPIs that we mentioned, for example, operations management, clinical oversight, people and performance, take them as a benchmark. These are just high-level KPIs. And for each region, when you're monitoring them, you will see where the variance is. You see how this model makes it very easy for you to compare performance, not just on a location level, but also not just on the locational nucleus, but also at the regional level, and then at the corporate level as well. So if you know that your performance, your region number 1 is doing well in operations, they have good schedule utilization rates, they have a higher production per operatory per chair, for each location that they're managing, then those benchmarks should be replicated across other locations, and that helps you understand, for example, where the leakages are. Are the cases not getting accepted? Is there a scheduling issue? Is there is it an issue with the collections? Is it because you're you're getting a lot of like wasted chair time due to no-shows and cancellations? And the same goes with clinical oversight and people performance. If there's a staff turnover, if the staff turnover ratio is way too much for region number 1, and if you're retaining good staff at region number 3, then that means that the protocols and the experience at region number 3 can be and should be replicated to region number 2 and region number 1. And again, there are other micro KPIs for each level as well that you need to monitor in order to see exactly which experiences have to be improved and which experiences can be replicated. But then that is going to make the video a lot more lengthier. So we'll talk about that in another video. Now, once you have your regional capacity defined, once you have, just streamlined your regional teams and your regional roles, then next comes the corporate governance. So corporate governance is when you're looking at the bigger picture. As a CEO or the owner of a multi-location, multi-state dental group, this layer matters a lot, because you cannot be present at every location, every region at the same time, but you need to know exactly what numbers to see in order to make sure that your revenue is stabilizing and improving, your margins are improving, your EBITDA is improving. And at this level, there are 3 functions that have to be managed. So, for example, at the location level, you need three functions at each location that are independent to each location. They're not intertwined or interlinked or shared across the locations, right? That's the clinical care, your clinicians, your office operations, and your patient experience. At the regional level, these are the three crucial roles or functions that have to be that are shared by one region. And by one region, I mean that all the locations that come in that cluster. So it's the operations management, your clinical oversight, and your people and performance management. And then at the corporate level, the three functions that have to be shared at the corporate level, which means that these are the functions that your entire group is watching or monitoring or handling centrally, are the corporate governance, your growth and patient acquisition models, and your financing and infrastructures. Now, the KPIs to look at when you talk about corporate layer or the group governance level is that for the group governance level, you need to see that your group EBITDA margins is stabilized. They're not getting a hit, year after year, month after month, quarter after quarter. So you need to have strategy and controls that are improving your profitability and not just bringing in revenue, which means that you're not just producing low value dentistry. You should focus on your production per operatory per day, and then your production per operatory across the regions. And your production numbers actually matter a lot because they eventually decide whether the same hour is being utilized by 20 cleanings or 20 hygiene patients, or it is being utilized by one high value implant case, because depending on what the cases are that you're handling, they're going to significantly impact your EBITDA margins. Next is the growth and patient acquisition models. What is the cost per required case? And although it matters to have that cost under control, but depending on what your production is like and what your what the margins you're looking to hit or what the targets you're looking to achieve, your marketing has to be accountable for the revenue and not just vanity metrics. You can't just be tracking how many people came in the door, what was the cost per lead, what was the cost per show. You need to understand what is your cost per case accepted, what is the cost per treatment completed, because that gives you a true measure of your return on your investment, because the cost to acquire a case is your investment, and what that case converts to and what you're collecting for that case is your return on your investment. So those are the metrics that you need to govern at the corporate level. And then what is your finance and infrastructure like? What are the days cash on hand? What is the cash flow stability? Are you getting the same kind of cash days every day? And although it may be too ideal to say that every day is going to be a high profitability or high EBITDA day, your growth is not creating financial, as long as your growth is not creating financial or liquidity risk, you're good to go. Because although the growth variance matters, your growth variance is going to be unavoidable, as you may call it, but it matters when it's happening at scale on every month, every quarter, every year. If you have a stable growth, then the day's production may not matter as much, although you can get into in depth into it eventually, but you need to first stabilize the bigger picture. You need to first stabilize what your monthly revenue looks like, what your quarterly revenue looks like, and what your yearly revenue looks like. So if you've been operating for more than 10 years and you have you've had like good first 5 years, but then the performance dipped significantly, like 30, 40, 50% after that, then those are the metrics that you need to understand and observe and see what changed. Because over the years, although the technology changed, one thing that's remained stable ever since, in the last 10 years or even before that, is patient experience. So tools came in place, software came in place, AI even came in place, and all of these have innovations, as you may call it, or technological advancements or evolution in dentistry, it all came to give patients an optimal experience. Because dentistry, end of the day, is a patient's or a people-faced service, as we call, as we talked about earlier. So you need to understand that if your revenue dipped significantly by a big percentage over the last 10 years or over the last 5 years or 3 years, then why did the variance happen? Where were the leaks? What were the reasons? What were the underlying issues? And if you feel that 10 years ago that your business was more people oriented, or you had more staff in place, and now it's the AI impacting the patient experience because people don't want to talk to AI, because that is a lot of what we are hearing online these days. Although that is also improving, and we have tools like Codent who have proven treatment plan acceptance rate as as they're evolving. But if you feel that 10 years ago your people were more comfortable talking to your patients were more comfortable talking to your people, and now that has changed because there are automated machines in place, then that says something about what kind of systems you have and why that lag is. And maybe you can have a hybrid model and not just rely on an automated answering machine for the patients if that is causing no-shows and cancellations. So these tiny tweaks can only be made once you understand where your leaks are and once you understand what to monitor and how to monitor your progress. Okay, so I hope this was easier to understand, because when you look at things like this, when you're looking at the location level, the regional level, and then the corporate level performance, you can stabilize a lot of things, and the impact trickles down. For example, at the corporate level, if you are, the impact trickles down from the corporate to the location level. So at the corporate level, if you're looking at your EBITDA margins, then they're not stable. If there's variance, if the the revenue per case completed, or let's call it ROI per case completed. So if the revenue per case completed has dropped, then you need to look at, in your operations and see whether there was, what was the acceptance rate for high value cases, whether there was staff turnover, whether there was utilization issues. And if you find one thing, so for example, if the acceptance rate was low, then you have to see whether it was because of no-shows or cancellations, or whether it was something with the case presentation issues. And then you can see which location showed the most variance. So it's like a loop. Once you have a stable production at one location, it multiplies to the region, and then it's scalable and compounds to the corporate level. And once you identify what the leaks are at the corporate level, then it becomes much easier for you to investigate or diagnose where the leak could be coming from at the regional level. And so if one of the three regions is not living up to the standard set at the corporate level, then you can easily understand, which cluster to diagnose or audit. And then in that cluster, in that audit, you exactly know which KPIs can be used to audit it, right? So all of this is interrelated, and all of this helps you understand how to improve your performance. Now that we've talked about the structure or the governance structure that can help you scale to to an enterprise level, let's talk about the process that can help you achieve that scale. And again, this is a very high level process, and then we can also get into the depth of it once if you let me know what you're looking to understand more. But let's talk about again, like we had three different levels. Let's talk about the three different phases of process of scalable operations. So how the process works is that you need to start by stabilizing your locations. If you already have scaled to that location, to that position where you have a corporate governance structure in place, then obviously you need to stabilize locations, but look at the corporate metrics and see where the leaks are before you come at the regional and then at the local level. But if you're still in the scaling phase, if you're still in the growth phase, if you still have like 1, 2, or 3 locations and looking to scale beyond that, then before going into the corporate metrics, start by stabilizing your locations. Obviously, those metrics cannot be ignored, but The first and foremost thing is to start by stabilizing your locations. Start by looking at the data of your locations and seeing which one is outperforming again and which one to replicate across the other locations. So the first phase is core alignment and control. Core alignment and control means that you control where demand goes and how the schedules are filling. Again, this comes down from how you're acquiring your patients, how your schedules are being blocked, how much, what is the chair utilization rate. Make ownership of results clear at every location. Which results or KPIs are to be monitored by the clinician, which have to be monitored by the office manager, and which have to be monitored by by your hygienist or by your dental assistant. See real performance daily, not just monthly reports. You have to look at the numbers and the metrics. You can't just go by what the managers are telling you. You can't just go by what you believe is true. You have to look at the real KPIs. So look at the data, see how many patients were scheduled for the day, how many did not show, how many were presented the treatment. What is your usual time frame for picking up the calls even, what is the usual time rate for responding to an inquiry that's coming in from any other source or channel. Log in realistic productivity standards per provider. So you can't be pushing your providers every day. If one provider outperformed on one of the days, and you can't use that as a benchmark, you have to take an average of your productivity per provider per day and then use that average as a benchmark. Because because you can push your team or your people some days, but you can't do that every day. Phase two is standardization and alignment. So make intake, follow-up, and case presentation consistent, like we talked about before. So the entire patient journey has to stay consistent. If your patient is coming in one day and then coming for a follow-up the next day, the experience should not be vastly different, because that can really put off the patients, because they will not. The patients like trust. Patients like to go to providers who they can trust, and trust comes from predictability, and predictability comes from repeatability. So if you're standardizing your process or patient journey, that is going to lead to a predictable and standardized flow and a patient experience. Standardize how high value cases such as implants are priced and presented. Align everyone on the same success metrics. So if you have the same benchmarks, and it's important to have the transparency and communication open with your team, that they know exactly which performance metrics they're going to be, they're going to be accountable for, and they have to look at, because every metric cannot be monitored, and but some of the metrics cannot be ignored. Send the right patients to offices built to treat them. So if you have multiple locations in a region, but some of the facilities have doctors who are more trained in high value cases and have the operatories and the systems and the equipment in place to treat high value cases better, then if you have a centralized intake process, say for example, you're getting all your patient inquiries coming through one centralized intake process, then you can easily route them to the offices that are better equipped to handle certain kinds of patient inquiries, because end of the day, what matters is that your patients are being treated, handled well, and they're getting a good treatment. Fix where cases are stalling and not just where the leads are dropping. So like I said before, it's not just about intake process. You can't just be monitoring what the intake process looks like. You also have to see whether your treatment plans are getting accepted. And if they're not getting accepted, if they're getting stalled, if the patient is not comfortable with it, then you have to look at those metrics that help you improve the treatment acceptance rates. And these two phases are about stabilizing the locations. They control the demand, they fix scheduling, they standardize case flow, and they align your teams. That is what makes mid-level management and performance tracking even possible. The KPIs that you have to monitor at this stage in these two phases where you are stabilizing your locations are lead to consult conversion rate. And this KPI you have to monitor at each location. It tells you whether your demand is turning into booked patients, and it matters because it protects your ad spend, your marketing costs, and exposes intake breakdowns. Next KPI to monitor is your case acceptance rate, which is, which has to be your primary focus, your high value focus. You need to put great emphasis on it. And this tells you whether treatment is being presented and understood. This drives growth without needing more leads, because if you're losing a lot of cases that are presented and they're not converting, then you need to fix your case conversion first before getting more people in, because it's just going to be like filling a leaky bucket. No shows plus short notice cancellation rates. So how much production is silently lost, because every time you're having a no show and cancellation, that is revenue lost that that is the cost loss that you spent acquiring the new patients. So it directly impacts your utilization and revenue stability. And your production per operator per day, and that is your current productivity per provider. How much is each provider producing? It's used as a diagnostic, and it's not an optimization target, which means that you need to understand what your production per operator per day is like for each location, because that is going to help you see where the variance is, and that variance then leads you like a detective to exactly what metrics and what processes to improve. And then your next is time to schedule after consult. That is the speed of decision. The sooner you pick up the call, the sooner you book a patient into your office. If you're booked 6 months out and you have an emergency case, or you have a high value case and you don't have blocks in your schedule that you have blocked out for such cases, then that patient is going to go to somebody else, and that has lost revenue. So it predicts whether your cases will stall or close, and that is an important metric to monitor. Now, the next phase is where once you have your location stabilized, then you go into scalability. So once you have all of this stabilized across 1 or 2 or 3 locations, that is when you're ready to scale beyond 3 locations and go into 6 or 8 or even 9 locations. And your scalability metrics is your scalability phase is when you're looking at full system integrations. So phase 4, right after you're ready to build, right when you have like standardized systems in place and you're ready to build them out, is when you have full system integration and you're looking at all new patient flows are coming in through one control system, which means that you have a centralized patient acquisition machine that is bringing in patients through the centralized system, and then it's being routed into the right kind of regions and the right offices that are meant to handle those inquiries. You don't have missed follow-ups or inconsistent reactivations. So if some patients did not book, came in for a consult but did not accept the treatment, then you have the right systems in place at the corporate level, which are trickling down across the regions and locations to make sure that you're bringing those patients back. You're managed by location performance and not anecdotes. Again, this comes down to tracking your KPIs. You start treating spend like an investment portfolio. So every time you're spending something, you're looking at the ROI percentages of it, and not just looking at vanity metrics like, how many people showed up, how many people were presented the cases. You catch problems before they turn into fires, because if you're not tracking how your cost is converting into revenue, then obviously that's going to lead to like bigger problems in the future. Now, phase 3 is where you're scaling your foundation. Invest where returns are proven, not where noise is the loudest. So you're investing where your returns are proven, which means that you see which locations are doing well in a region, high value cases, which locations have proven track record for high value cases. Then you route most of your high value cases to that location. Now, you also have to see why they are doing well in high value cases, and you have to make sure that you are bringing that standard and replicating it across every other location, because that is going to help you improve your margins. But as a first step, start investing your resources where they're required. Add chairs and providers only when demand supports it. So if you have one location that does not have a lot of patient demand, you don't have to add more chairs and providers to it unless you feel that they're already maxed out and you need more chairs and providers in order to increase capacity for the demand that is coming into your locations. Finally, see what marketing actually produces by location. So, which locations are giving more returns on the investment or the marketing cost that is being governed by the corporate level or at the corporate level. compare performance that is apples to apples across the group. So you have to compare, for example, production per operator per day or the clinical KPIs. Compare the clinical care KPIs each location with the other location's clinical care KPIs. Compare office operations with the office operation KPIs. Compare patient experience with the patient experience KPIs. Do not mix the KPIs or comparison across locations, across regions, or on a corporate level with the wrong teams. You have to compare the right teams, the same kind of teams with each other. You can't compare different teams because that is not going to give you a realistic metric or a realistic audit of your performance. At the phase 3 and the phase 4 level, this is where leadership layers and corporate functions start paying off. Now you can invest confidently, compare locations fairly, and run everything through one operating system. So the KPIs that you have to monitor at this level are your revenue per provider hour, that is your production per operator per day, your true productivity of clinical capacity. It matters because it guides staffing and expansion decisions. Because if your production per operator per day in one location is lower compared to the other location, then it's going to directly impact your eventual revenue at the regional level and hit your EBITDA. So once you have those benchmarks in place, they help guide the staffing issues. It tells you whether your production can be improved by hiring another another surgical team in place, hiring another hygienist, hiring another dental assistant, or opening another operatory. The next KPI to monitor is your contribution margin by location. That is the revenue minus variable clinical costs. So this is again your EBITDA. It shows if growth is profitable and not just busy. If that margin is shrinking year on year, then you need to see why that margin is shrinking and you need to work on it. And if that margin is stable, then that is a good sign for eventual buyouts and expansion. The other KPI is centralized system adoption rate. So the percentage of patients flowing through standardized workflows. If it's the same protocol, same patient experience, same patient journey, then that is a good measure for your group. It confirms that your group is now operating like a system and can be scaled at the national level. The last KPI to monitor at the phase 3 and 4 are chair utilization rates. That is whether physical capacity is fully utilized and whether it matters because it prevents premature expansion issues. Now, once you have your scalable, once you have the scaling foundation in place, you move on to the investor ready phase. That is where you have independent systems in place, where you have a centralized patient experience going on. And it has, again, two phases to it. One is the phase 5, that is the enterprise playbook installation. That is your budget decisions are following the same rules and they're not based on opinions. You have data to back your budget locations, whether it is about getting a new team in place, increasing your capacity, improving your systems. You forecast outcomes instead of reacting to surprises. And you already know whether it's going to be a dip in your demand, whether it's going to, what systems are going to help you improve that demand, or whether it's something that's inevitable. On busy, heavy snow days, whether you'll be seeing less patients, whether you'll be seeing no patients at all. It also tells you whether, your how long is it going to take how long does it usually take for a high value case to be accepted and turned into revenue or cash collected. Schedules optimized for production and not just fullness. So you should have schedules blocked out, like I said before, for high value treatment. Do you have time for emergency cases? Are you making sure that every inquiry that's coming in is being handled on time? And your marketing and ops finally work towards the same goals. Now, phase 6 or the enterprise level DSO is where buyers see a system, not a founder dependent group. You're independent. You have a group that is running independent of you and is based on the systems. You have high value case flow that becomes predictable and it's not just lucky or accidental. You have new locations open with proven operating models, and then the valuation driven by systems, and it's not just heroic management. The phase 5 and phase 6 are when the business becomes investor ready, budgets follow rules, forecasting replaces surprises, and growth comes from repeatable playbooks instead of heroic efforts. This is when you really have built an asset. You've taken yourself out from the picture and developed a machine that runs on its own without requiring constant intervention. Yes, it may require some operating models, some monitoring, but it does not require your constant intervention. So well done and hats off to you. And what KPIs you need to monitor in order to make sure that it's scaling at the right pace and there are no accidental breaks in the performance. So EBITDA consistency across location. That tells you that there's stability of profitability, which means that your EBITDA stays consistent and it is not fluctuating. It matters because this repeatability and scalability and predictability of EBITDA tells you that your valuation eventually be multiplied and it does not get hit. Your cost to revenue ratios by category, that means that your structural efficiency of your business, it shows if margins are defensible. The forecast accuracy, that is your 30 to 90-day forecast, which tells you about your predictability of operations. And it replaces founder intuition. So if you've been operating for more than 3, 5, 10 years, then you know exactly which times of the year are going to be more productive, which times of the year is going to be slow in production. And if it is something that is beyond your control, such as weather changes, whether, any other thing that is beyond your control that impacts production, then that is something that you can look into and forecast and take into account when you're handling your demand or trying to increase production at other times of the year. Your production per operator per day trend, normalized year on year, it tells you about your scalability of productivity. That is, the buyers want upward stability. And founder dependency ratio, that is the operational risk to buyers. It takes a direct hit to valuation. And if you are now able to, the easiest test to run in order to make sure that your system or your group is now independent of you is to take a break. Take 1 or 2 days off. If you can, take a week off and see how it impacts your operations. If it's not impacting your operations, if your operations are running smoothly, then well done. You have buyer-ready system in place. But if one of the systems starts getting impacted with you not in the picture, then that identifies or that highlights exactly what you need to go in and fix. So that was all about how the phases are of scalability, what the phases of scalability look like, what the organizational structure looks like, what the KPIs and metrics look like when you're trying to scale to an enterprise level group. I'm going to, before we wind up the video, I'm going to be talking about some of the risks and some of the objections you may face when you're scaling to an enterprise group level. And these are some of the objections that are commonly seen by practices and by their team members. So, and I'm also going to be talking about how you can mitigate those risks and how you can handle those objections. So the objection number 1 is that performance is dependent on individuals instead of the process. Now, you feel that in order to have a system in place where your operations are running smoothly and are not dependent on the people, you feel that the performance depends on individuals instead of processes. And while we've talked about how patient experience is defined by the people and the teams in place, once you have the mandatory playbooks, and for every new team member who's coming in, and those playbooks have to be designed keeping into account your highest performing team members at each level in each department, for each system or each process. So have those playbooks in place. Conduct mystery calls and audits, and have a scorecard that incentivizes. So when you have a new team member coming in, hand them the playbook that is also going to act like a training manual, and then also communicate the KPIs on which your team members are going to be evaluated. And if they outperform those KPIs, then you should go on and reward them and incentivize their performance. And if if you have those KPIs or scorecards in place, then your team members or new team members or existing ones even are going to know exactly which performance has to be improved. And through the playbook, they will know how to improve it. Now, next is the local managers control growth levers instead of leadership. Now, shift decision power to operations director. Have an operational director in place. Tie bonuses to production per operator per day. Conversion and capacity utilization, and it should not be an office level revenue. So once you have the operational director and you have the production per operator per day, you know exactly, and like we talked about, the operational director knows exactly on a regional level which KPIs have to be monitored and how the gaps have to be identified and rectified. Risk number 3 is that early stage talent fails at enterprise stage complexity. Now, you should have a 30, 60, and 90-day onboarding plan with the manuals, with the playbooks, and with the scorecards in place, also with the incentive protocols in place. Replace low performance by day 60. And you should make sure that your benchmarks for each 30-day performance are realistic and not too ambitious. And how you're going to make sure that they're realistic and not too ambitious is because you're going to benchmark the average performance that you've seen over the years across your teams on those time durations, and have KPIs standardized across all functions. So for one function at each level, the same KPI should be followed. And the same goes for regional KPIs, and eventually they all translate into standardization at the corporate level. Next is leadership cannot manage when it cannot see what it cannot see in real time. So have one CRM, one dashboard, one operating scorecard, have daily quality assurance checks on intake, scheduling, and follow-ups. And this dashboard does not have to have very in-depth KPIs and matrices. You can have those layers in there, but your CEO should be able to, and these dashboards can be made in real time, and they're populated in real time. So while you can have revenue layers in place for location-based KPIs, for regional KPIs, and for enterprise level or corporate KPIs, it is important to understand that at the leadership level, the one CRM, the one dashboard should only reflect the prime or the main KPIs that interest the CEO, or that impact the EBITDA, or that impact the revenue, or that impact the operations and the patient experience on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, or on a quarterly basis. So, that gives like a morning huddle check for your corporate teams to make sure that, everything under them on the regional and location level is working perfectly. Now, the risk number 5 is that high-value cases are lost before they ever reach the chairs. So do weekly audits, have AI transcription reviews, and it's very important to have systems in place that are doing those transcription reviews, because they make everything faster and easier compared to manual checks. Once you have those transcription reviews, they're able to analyze and diagnose exactly where the lacks are, where the leaks are, and using that diagnosis, you're able to find a solution to make sure that your performance can be optimized. Have retraining for people who are below performance, not performing up to the par, and use scorecards to monitor performance and improve it. Now, the next is growth strategy, outsourced instead of governed. You should have a 90-day agency freeze when you're trying to audit and recalibrate what your group is, how your group is performing, and how the performance has to be improved. Have a channel audit against EBITDA contribution. So see where the demand is coming in from each channel, and which channels are leading to better revenue and ROI, and which channels are leaking ROI and how they can be improved. And replace underperformers with internal governance using the scorecards, the playbooks, the protocols, and training systems. Now, risk number 7 is that revenue growth outruns operational throughput, which means that your production per operator per day and surgical utilization analysis should be done before spending is increased. Once you audit and improve those leaks, then you should think about scaling your spending. And because if you're scaling your spending, you're only increasing your cost and you're shrinking your revenue margins. route cases to capacity first locations, and then expand operatories before expanding your ads. Because if your teams are performing at an optimal level, they're maxed out, then you need to have more capacity, more operatories, more providers in place before you increase the spend to bring in that demand. Because if you're increasing spend and increasing the demand without having a system to fulfill that demand, then that is going to impact your patient experience. Risk 8, inconsistent pricing and financing destroys case acceptance at scale. So if you should have unified high value, high case pricing in architecture, you see Aspen, you see Heartland, we all know how transparent they are, and it's very openly communicated in all of their branding and communications. You should have the same unified pricing. And I mentioned implant here, but not just implant. Talk about the same unified pricing architecture for consultations, for hygiene, for emergencies, for high value cases, for cleanings, for just bringing in and reactivating patients. You should have the same financing narrative. You should have the same financing systems in place. If you're offering payment plans, if you have membership plans, there should not be variance. They should be standardized across every location, across every region. And you should have the same case presentation protocols. Have your teams go through the manuals, see what your protocols are like, see what has performed over the years, and use that as a benchmark, as a playbook. And your case presentation protocols should talk about the verbiage, talk about the first impact, talk about handling financing issues, talk about handling patients' uneasiness with the duration of the treatment, with the pain associated with the treatment. And once you have that, it becomes far more easy and far easier for you to standardize that and then scale that on an enterprise level. So there's so much more that we can cover here, and there's so many interesting topics that have also come out of this, but I'm glad that you stayed with me throughout. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I would love to know what your goals are for the next 5 years, and because that is what is going to define. And I will be happy to see 5 years from now if you watch this video and tell me if this video helped you reach those goals. So until next time, bye-bye.